So Guy used to be in the Navy, and he characterises me as like the absent-minded admirals he had to look after when he was in a commander type post. Well, I like doing all forms of climbing, really, all forms of doing things in the outdoors. But I think my preferred climbing is two types, really. Firstly, climbing in Scotland in winter. Absolutely love climbing in Scotland in winter. The other sort of climbing I really enjoy is the so-called greater ranges. So climbing in India, Pakistan, Nepal, China, Tibet, those kind of countries. And I particularly enjoy trying to climb peaks that haven't been climbed before, or faces or ridges on these peaks that haven't been climbed before. The first thing I'm drawn to, or it's quite big in my mind, especially for the expeditionary climbs, are climbs that are safe. Safe from objective hazard. The mountains are so dynamic, with seracs, carving, rockfall, a lot of day-by-day variation in temperature. Something safe, a ridge or buttress or something, those are the kind of things that stand out. And I first saw Janhukot in a book that I'd got from the British Lending Library about the 1938 Austrian expedition to the Garhwal Himalaya. And in this book, there was a photograph of Janhukot looking very fearsome. And that was back then when I'd just really started climbing in the Greater Ranges. And I looked at this thing and thought, that's a lovely looking mountain, but I'm not ever going to be able to climb that. When you first get to the Gangotri Glacier and see it disappearing into the distance with these huge mountains, these 6,000 to 7,000 metre peaks on either side, just the impression of vast scale really lands on you. The other thing often about the Himalayan valleys, apart from the first 3 or 4 hours of the morning, they're really quite noisy places, because there's always some ice crashing somewhere, or an avalanche coming down, or rock fall coming down, so that you get this sense of the whole environment being in some sort of motion. Anyway, in 2014, Simon Yearsley and I got a permit to go back to try Janhukot. We got onto the summit ridge, and we came to some really hard technical mixed climbing right on the crest of the ridge, and we call that feature the castle. So it was steep granite off-widths and chimneys, and it really slowed us down. So by the time we were sort of 2/3 of the way up the castle, it was starting to get dark, but worse. The wind just kept building and building as the temperatures dropped, as the darkness came on, and we just thought, we're not going to be able to keep warm. So at 6,640 metres, with the summit at 6,800, we had to turn round and descend. So of course that really felt like unfinished business, 6,640 metres. Some of my climbing friends said to me, well, you've done most of it. But you won't necessarily need to go back. But alpine climbing is definitely about summits, about pointy bits. So determined to go back. 2018, team assembled was Paul Figg, who I've done a lot with in Alaska and the Himalaya, Guy Buckingham, who is a more recent climbing partner of mine. Good things about climbing as a three: mutual support, you can share the jobs out, all that kind of thing. Bad thing about climbing as a three: trying to get 3 of us into a sort of 2.5 person tent with half of it hanging out over the void wasn't ideal. So then the climb changes characters. We've been climbing up this buttress, and now we're following the ridge. So early on the 3rd day, we passed the campsite that Simon and I had used in 2014, the Too Low campsite. And as we came to that, we saw clouds building up in the west. And as we started along it, we started to hear thunder rumbling off to the outside of the Chowkamba range. And so we really thought we'd got it made. The weather had cleared up that night. As I say, only 300 metres of vertical. We're well fed. We've got a great bivouac. We've got a good plan. And I think we can tell that we were quite confident because we set the alarm for 5 o'clock in the morning the next day, which is pretty late for an alpine start. Normally you kind of set it for 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Set it for 5 in the morning. But we didn't need an alarm because when I woke at about 4:45, I just heard pitter-patter, pitter-patter, pitter-patter on the outside of the tent. And there's just that absolutely distinctive noise in a tent that you know it's either snowing or hailing or raining outside. And before the alarm went off, I unzipped the tent and looked outside, and I could see that far. You know, I could see about a foot. It was just completely thick, misty fog. And unbelievably, it was raining. This was 6,500 metres. I've never encountered anything like it. It was a light rain was falling. You could see it beaded on the outside of the tent. And it was like, oh shit. Paul and Guy woke up and said, you know, what's it like out there? Malcolm said, I can't see a thing, and it's raining. Raining? Yep, it's raining. We can't go if it's raining. Because to get wet at these kind of altitudes, you're not prepared, you don't go with equipment designed for getting wet. It's just not something you expect. You go with stuff to keep you warm, not necessarily to keep you dry. We then thought, what the hell are we going to do about this? Let's just put the alarm back and hope that it clears. So we set the alarm for 7 o'clock, and I'm not sure any of us slept. I just lay there and my heart was just pounding, not with the altitude, but the thought that we've come so close. This is the 3rd time I've been on the mountain, 2nd time I've been here with Paul, and the thought that we were so close and that we might be denied so close to the summit. And I started thinking, what can we do about it? Can we hang out here for, 24 hours? Do we have enough food, enough gas? And I remember the thought coming, I just don't want to lie in this tent, in this cramped tent for 24 hours before giving it another go. I really don't want that to happen. So we looked out again at 7 o'clock, still the same. And we had quite a talk about it then. We were convinced that it would not be safe to go on if it continued to rain, or because even if it was warm enough to rain, it wasn't going to stay warm enough to rain for very long. It would eventually drop cold again, and we couldn't be up there with our equipment wet. We couldn't get ourselves into a situation where we were getting stuff wet. There's a kind of rotten sweetness to failure at the moment that you decide that you're not going to be able to do something. There's a relief of tension. There's a pleasure, a joy that you're going to get out of the difficult situation and you're going to start going down. But it's also very tainted as well, which is why I kind of think of it as a rotten sweetness. And if you failed a few times, you can almost feel it drawing you in. You can almost feel, I'm going to step into that failure. I'm going to just relax the tension and we're going to start going down, and we'll step into that, oh well, we gave it our best shot type mental space. So we said, well, just give it another hour. Just give it another hour and see what we decide then. And we didn't talk anymore. We didn't sleep. I think all of us the thoughts were running around our heads. Is this it? Did we come so close? Or might something change for us? We looked out at 8 o'clock and something had changed. It had started to snow. So it stopped raining. Temperatures must have dropped by a couple of degrees. The air was the visibility was just as low. It was still misty. Not the kind of conditions that you'd normally sort of embark on going upwards at 6,500 metres. But I just said, it's just like Scotland. It's like, and that became a kind of refrain, just like Scotland. Guy, the previous night, had taken a photograph across the traverse that we were having to make beneath the castle to the rocky area where we could see this gully that was going to bypass the castle. So we had a photograph on Guy's camera of where the gully ought to be and what the gully looked like if you could see anything. So we didn't pack the tent up, we were leaving it in the snowball because we'd come back there that night, and we started fumbling our way across the traverse. Initially it was moving together, and then when we thought we were roughly under where the gully should be, we started climbing upwards. We climbed up and we were up on the ridge. So we'd bypassed the castle, we are on the south ridge heading for the summit. We've passed 3 or 4 full summits, and on this particular one, Guy, who's ahead, stops rather than keeping to moving on to the next summit, and brings both Paul and I up. And he said, I think this is the one. We could see about 40 metres up ahead, and it was just more ascents really. There was no reason to believe that the next full summit would actually be the summit. Guy had just had this sense that this would be, that the next rise was the actual summit. And so very generously, Paul and Guy said, look Malcolm, you've been on this mountain 3 times, Paul's been on it twice, we would like you to lead off to the summit. Climbed up about another 10 metres, it was still steep, still hard ice, and 2 metres after my last ice screw, my head popped up over the rise and I could see that was the summit. And I looked down the other side, the ridge was just dropping away. This was the high point, and I shouted down, made it! And the Guy shouted, give us a wave. So I did sort of old-fashioned victory salute and brought the others up. And we were so lucky, we were so privileged that as Paul and Guy made it to the summit, it might sound unbelievable, but this is the way it happens, the clouds just cleared. And so I've got pictures of Paul just as he reaches the summit, and there's still clouds scudding by, and then the first pictures of the descent show that there's no clouds on any of the high peaks. Everything suddenly comes clear. So everything above about 5,200 metres is completely clear. The light is absolutely beautiful, orange, rosy glow. And we don't normally, we normally have a thing about not doing any congratulation on the summit. You know, the summit is all only halfway type thing. But for some reason on this one, don't know why, maybe overcome by emotion, maybe confidence in the team, we did all give each other a hug, congratulate one another, and we thanked one another for each of our contribution to getting up it. And then we started the descent in the lovely warm glow of evening. Not long after darkness, we were back in our snow bowl, content and happy, the summit in the bag.